Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of candlelit ballrooms, whispers behind fans, and love letters passed under society's nose. Picture this. Your glove hand brushes against someone else's during a waltz, and boom, that's your wildest romantic moment of the year. You can't be alone with your crush, can't speak to them without a formal introduction, and even looking too long might get you labeled improper. You're basically trying to fall in love while surrounded by judges, snitches, and your own mother. And if you think texting someone you up at 2 a.m. is awkward, try doing courtship with a chaperone staring at your back like a hawk in a corset. You probably won't survive this era with your sanity or your heart intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy little corner of the world reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge into your first societable in a tight bodice and a face trained to smile just the right amount. Nothing too forward, nothing too shy. You've spent the last 6 weeks learning to curtsy at 30 degrees, balance a teacup without rattling, and say how charming at least 5 different ways. This is your debut. You're in season now, ripe for marriage, like a social pomegranate. If you're rich, you're at a mansion with gold leaf ceilings, string quartets, and enough perfume to knock out a horse. If you're middle class, it's smaller, maybe a dinner party where the roast chicken is overcooked but reputation's on point. Either way, you are no longer a girl. You're a potential wife. And yes, that means your hair is up now. If your curls are still bouncing loose on your shoulders, everyone assumes you're still playing with dolls. Courtship, Victorian style, isn't dating. It's performance art. Every glance, every gesture is timed and scrutinized. If a gentleman wants to talk to you, he has to be formally introduced. No hey across the room, no drinks at the bar, just a practice bow and a question about the weather. Now, imagine actually liking someone. You've exchanged 5 sentences over 2 months, and you're swooning. But you can't write him. That's only allowed after you're engaged. You can't walk alone with him unless Aunt Harriet is speed walking behind you. And if you so much as blush too long, someone's mother will mention it in the drawing room. Still, love finds its way. Mainstream history loves to gloss over this part, but you sneak it in, literally. Letters folded into books, coded messages in flower arrangements. Even a well-timed puddle becomes a romance trap. He offers you his handkerchief. Your fingers brush. Your pulse absolutely loses its mind. Enter the fan. Yes, the dainty lace fan flapping innocently near a lady's chin. It's not just cooling her off. It's a secret language. Hold it closed. Sorry, not interested. Half open, just friends. Fully extended and aimed in your direction. Ding, ding, ding. We have flirtation. Use the right hand to fan. She's into you. Use the left. Don't even try. Fanning quickly. She's nervous, or maybe just really hot and faking boldness. Slow fan. Possibly taken. Possibly bored. Possibly both. Here's the quirky kicker. One specific move, opening and closing the fan repeatedly, meant she wanted a kiss. Not a handshake. A kiss. And if she swung it gently at her side, that's practically saying, let's slip away while my aunt argues about marmalade. Historians still argue whether the fan's language was really that widespread or just a fun game passed around among society girls and bored poets. But enough women used it, and enough men learned to read it, that it became a dangerous little rebellion hiding in plain silk. Even with all that etiquette, one wrong rumor could destroy your life. That's your Victorian reality check. It didn't matter if you followed the rules perfectly. If someone saw you smile too long at the wrong man, you might be whispered about. If you exchanged letters without a proposal on the table, you could be labeled fast. And being fast didn't mean you liked motorcycles. It meant your entire marriageability rating went up in flames. So, you learn the game. You perfect the glance. You whisper to your friend not about what he said, but how he looked when he said it. And you treasure the tiniest moment. A glove dropped and returned. A shoulder grazed in a crowd. A stolen second before the chaperone clears her throat like a human foghorn. Victorian love was like living in a reality show judged by ghosts and gossip. But still, people fell. They waited, watched, and hoped. They risked it, because no matter how many rules there were, some hearts refused to fold. And that, dear listener, is only the beginning. Marriage or merger, when love became a ledger. You walk down the aisle, or, more accurately, you float in that corseted gown, smile locked in place like a wax doll. You've done it. The season has ended. The chaperones are exhaling into their tea, and you're engaged to someone who probably hasn't seen you without gloves. Congratulations. You're now entering the business side of romance. Because make no mistake, in Victorian England, marriage wasn't just a sacred bond. It was a transaction. Your dowry. Yes, that bundle of land, cash, or valuable knickknacks is the price of admission. Your father negotiates it like he's buying a racehorse. The groom's family makes promises in return. A yearly allowance, maybe a cottage, or a portion of their estate, if you're lucky and your future mother-in-law isn't a full-blown gargoyle. All of this goes into something called a marriage settlement. It's not romantic. It's a contract, a legal map for who controls what, and who gets to inherit the spoils once you've both, well, expired. If you thought prenups were cold, Victorian settlements make them look like love letters. But here's the kicker. You and your new husband don't technically own that property. It goes into a trust. Trustees, often crusty uncles or lawyers with very interesting facial hair, control the purse strings. You're beneficiaries, not rulers. You can use the silver teapot, but you don't get to sell it. And when children come along, don't expect to divvy up the estate fairly. Primogeniture ensures that everything lands in the lap of your eldest son. Your daughters, they'll need dowries of their own, or they are headed straight to the charming but unmarried aunt section of society. Historians still argue whether these marriage settlements actually protected women or simply kept wealth consolidated in the hands of already powerful families. The debate swirls like London fog. But this wasn't just about money. It was about control. Because now that you've said, I do, the law treats you like you said, I disappear. Welcome to the doctrine of coverture, where your legal identity, your autonomy, your ability to sign your own name vanishes. You are now one with your husband. Not metaphorically, legally. In fact, under British law, you no longer exist as an individual. Before marriage, you could own things, inherit a little, maybe start a modest business selling marmalade or poems. After marriage, that money is his. That house, his. Your body, also his. And the children, you guessed it. Let that sink in. If your husband walks out and takes the kids with him, the courts won't even blink. If he beats you, cheats on you, sells your jewelry, or locks you in the attic with nothing but jam and dry toast, the law shrugs and says, well, that's a domestic matter. Now, here comes the fringe horror story. And yes, it's real. There was a belief, mostly among men, surprise, that sleeping with a virgin could cure venereal diseases like syphilis or gonorrhea. I know. Breathe. We're going to get through this. This virgin cure myth floated around for centuries. But in Victorian England, it collided with hypocrisy and entitlement in horrific ways. Some men, infected from years of brothel visits or secret affairs, would bring their disease straight home. Respectable wives, women who followed every rule, started getting mysteriously sick. Miscarriages, strange rashes, hair loss, infertility, even death. And when they asked doctors what was happening, they were told it was a female complaint. The doctors knew, but under pressure from wealthy, influential husbands, they stayed silent. Some husbands, in desperation or twisted logic, acted on the myth, seeking out younger and younger virgins to cleanse themselves. In certain cases, that meant children, girls stolen of their innocence, silenced by shame, and discarded when they failed to heal their abuser. And remember, under coverture, a man could not legally rape his wife. Because how can you violate something that already belongs to you? Historians still argue how widespread the virgin cure belief was in actual practice versus whispered folklore. But the damage it caused is documented and devastating. Meanwhile, society kept praising family values and modesty. Because sure, let's toast virtue with a cup of arsenic-laced hypocrisy. You lie in a grand bed, stitched sheets, silk canopy, and a sense of dread you can't name. Your husband sleeps soundly beside you, dreaming of land ownership and fox hunts. You lie awake, counting the ceiling roses, wondering what part of you still belongs to you. You smile at breakfast. You write thank you notes with shaking hands. You show up for dinner and pretend the roast is excellent, even though your stomach churns. Because you're a wife now, and wives don't complain. They don't ask questions. They certainly don't pack a bag and leave, not without risking everything. Still, in the parlor, the garden, the drawing room, you're watched. Your behavior, your speech, your waistline. You exist to reflect well on your husband's status. You are his most decorative property, his finest acquisition. You once flirted with a fan. Now you learn to breathe with one. Behind the curtains, secrets, bruises, and deadly tea. You stir your tea slowly, watching the sugar swirl in delicate loops. Across from you, your husband reads the paper, the same way he always does, shoulders rigid, brow furrowed like he's solving the mystery of life. But really he's just ignoring you. You learn not to speak during tea, or dinner, or walks. You've learned to keep your voice in your chest and your thoughts behind your teeth. Because sometimes, when you do speak, his hand twitches. And once, just once, that twitch turned into something much, much worse. But who would believe you? In the Victorian home, domestic abuse wasn't a scandal. It was a secret. The home was a man's castle. And if that castle had screams echoing down its stone walls, well, it was nobody's business. There were no shelters, no hotlines, no support groups, just carpet to kneel on and bruises to cover with lace. If your husband struck you, society might offer you two polite options: fix your behavior or hide the evidence. You try to keep your face calm at church. You nod during the vicar's sermon about obedience and charity. You even smile at Lady Everly when she asks about your husband's fine manners. But behind your closed bedroom door, you've hidden a notebook, tucked under floorboards or disguised as a recipe journal. It's your diary, your one safe place. And tonight, while he snores downstairs, you write. I flinched before he even raised his voice. I think that's the part one hates the most. These aren't sweet recollections of croquet and cream buns. These are cries carved on a paper. Victorians adored diaries, especially women. But the ones they published were edited, sanitized. The real diaries? They told of pain, of fear, of silence that lasted decades. One woman wrote only, "He pushed me again. I stayed quiet. I always stay quiet." Mainstream history often forgets these women. But their ink is still out there, brittle and browned, sometimes read in museums, sometimes found in attics, sometimes still dismissed as melodrama. Historians still argue whether these accounts reflect a small number of outliers or a widespread epidemic of hidden violence. But even one broken woman, silenced by law, says enough. And yet, you wonder, why didn't she leave? Why didn't you? Well, because you couldn't. Divorce, at least until 1857, required an actual act of parliament. That's right, not a court visit, not a lawyer. A literal law just for your marriage. And unless your last name was stitched into royal linens, you weren't getting one. Only 324 divorces were granted in England between 1700 and 1857. Only 4 of those were petitioned by women. 4. Even after 1857, the rules were lopsided. A man could divorce his wife for adultery alone. You had to prove adultery plus cruelty, desertion, incest, or something similarly horrifying. Just catching him in bed with a maid? Not enough. You also needed bruises, or a dead pet, or proof that he'd gambled away your dowry. You might spend years collecting evidence, hiding witnesses, documenting your bruises. And if you finally made it to court, guess what? The newspapers printed everything. Names, allegations, sometimes even diary entries, like poor Isabella Robinson, whose romantic daydreams, not real events, were read aloud as courtroom entertainment. Your dignity gone, your privacy demolished, your name dragged through every salon in London. And if you did succeed, you might want a separation, but not the kids. Not the money. Just a cold room in your cousin's attic and a vague promise that maybe you wouldn't starve. So what did some women do? They reached for the teacup. Poison, silent, tasteless, odorless, became the weapon of women with no voice. Specifically, arsenic, also known, charmingly, as inheritance powder. You could find it in rat poison, face cream, and even wallpaper. You didn't need to hide it in a pistol drawer, you kept it next to the biscuits. And while the numbers were never huge, about 40 women tried for spousal poisoning during the Victorian era. It was enough to send society into a frenzy. Suddenly, every respectable drawing room held the echo of a whispered, "What if she's next?" A woman once seen as the angel of the house was now feared as the potential executioner of her husband's soup course. But why arsenic? Because it didn't require strength. It didn't scream. It was slow, subtle. It let women strike from within the very domestic sphere that imprisoned them. A poison spooned into pudding. A death masked as stomach flu. Take Mary and Cotton, perhaps the most infamous. She lost husband after husband, child after child, all due to gastric trouble. Turns out, she was collecting life insurance policies along the way. Cold, absolutely. But what made the public really shiver was this. She seemed normal, calm, dutiful, unremarkable. Some saw her as a monster. Others, as a woman molded by a monstrous world. Historians still argue whether Victorian poisoners were sociopaths or survivors, black widows or tragic heroines with no way out. You pick up your own teacup, just for a moment. You're not thinking about arsenic. Not seriously. Not yet. But you understand now, in a quiet way, that pain teaches you things. You understand why a woman might do it. Because you've been silenced, humiliated, stripped of your name, your money, even your diary. And some days, the most dangerous thing in the house isn't him. It's you. The afterglow of oppression. What still lingers today. You step outside one afternoon, just for air, and the sun hits your skin like a surprise. It's warm. Too warm. And for a second, you're not a wife. Not a woman hiding bruises. Not a woman calculating how much arsenic fits in a spoon. You're just tired. Tired of smiling. Tired of the rules. Tired of being a metaphor in someone else's story. But the Victorian world still watches. Your purity is your passport. Your silence. Your sanctuary. From the moment you could walk without wobbling, you've been taught one thing. A woman's worth lives between two extremes. Saint or scandal. There's no middle. You're either the angel in the house, or you're what people whisper about at garden parties. Mainstream history paints Victorian women as delicate creatures, paragons of modesty. But behind that lace and those soft sighs, crushing expectations. Sex, for instance, wasn't just taboo. It was dangerous if you were the one having it. A man could carouse, boast, even brag about brothel visits. But you? One mistake, one rumor, and your name was burned from polite society. You were a fallen woman, and fallen meant forever. And yet, men were allowed, expected, even to explore. Some doctors even encouraged them to get experience before marriage, as if wives came with a user manual. Meanwhile, young women were warned not to even think about their bodies, or desire, or, heaven forbid, enjoyment. Historians still argue whether this double standard truly protected female virtue or simply preserved male freedom. But either way, the damage lingers, especially when you realize how the classes twisted morality. Working class girls, often left out of the purity equation entirely. Many worked long hours in factories or kitchens, often preyed on by employers. If they became pregnant, they weren't rescued. They were fired, shamed, sent away, or worse, forced into sex work for survival. The same society that condemned prostitutes turned a blind eye to the men who made them. One quirky but true example. Wealthy women formed charities to reform prostitutes, but their husbands were often the clientele. That's not satire. That's Thursday. And still, society smiled. You probably know the story from there. You've seen the costume dramas, the tidy resolutions, and then she found love anyway endings. But for thousands of women, there was no resolution. Just silence. Just survival. And the question rises like steam from a teacup. Has anything really changed? Because the corsets are gone. The coverture laws have been rewritten. You can vote, file for divorce, open a bank account. You can even say no and expect the law to back you up. But the control? It doesn't always wear lace anymore. Sometimes it shows up in algorithms, or in job reviews, or in whispered judgment about how many people you've dated, or what you wore to that party. Maybe you're still watched. Maybe not by chaperones, but by comment sections, HR departments, social circles where too much still feels like a verdict. Maybe that old marriage settlement just turned into a mortgage application. Maybe the language of the fan has been replaced by unread texts and ghosting. But it's there. The echo. It's in your need to smile when you're uncomfortable. It's in your instinct to explain yourself when you don't have to. It's in the tiny fear that if you walk away, you won't be believed. You breathe in slowly. You're not in a drawing room. You're here now, listening, learning, maybe feeling seen in a way some of those women never were. And you ask, gently, how many of their fears still live in you? The night settles deeper now. Your room feels a little cooler, like the past has exhaled. You let the shadows lengthen on the walls, soft and harmless. Your heartbeat slows. The worst parts of this story, the rage, the fear, the desperate scraping of a woman trying to matter, they begin to dissolve just a little in the hush of this moment. You picture those lost diaries, the ones tucked under floorboards, written in shaky hands. You imagine someone finding them, not to mock, not to shame, but to listen. Their stories didn't end with silence. Neither does yours. You aren't locked in a parlor. You're not waiting for permission. You're not whispering through a fan, hoping someone understands. You're here, awake, aware, and safe. Let that feeling wrap around you now, soft as dusk. You've wandered through candlelit halls and dusty courtrooms, tiptoed across poisoned teacups and secrets sewn into petticoats. You've heard the voices they tried to muffle, and now it's time to rest. So take one more breath. Let your body soften into the quiet. Let the lace curtains close, not in fear, but in peace. You made it through the darkest corners of Victorian love. Sleep well.